Hi everybody, Brent here from quantlabs.net. Today's September 19th. Time is 12:02 p.m. my time, New York time, doesn't matter. Just going to show you European status to see how it's doing with the with the pandemic, coronavirus. Let's check it out. This is from Eurostats. I've had this script for a while, just started to revisit it. Here's some of the countries that we have available. We also have the different classifications throughout the economies of each country. So we have here Turkey, UK is part of this, Sweden, Finland, some of the smaller countries, Austria, Luxembourg, some of Latvia, Lithuania, Cyprus, obviously the big ones, Spain, France, Germany, Belgium, and then we also have here, still part of it is the UK. So let's look at these. All right, so let me just go through some of these. Let's look at, first one probably comes to mind is Germany. Germany's not looking too good if you want my opinion. And before I forget, we also can peek into these areas of the economy of each country. We've got services, industry, consumer retail and building, and the overall ESI and EEI for employment indicator. Employment expectation indicator and economic sentiment indicator. So this is the ESI stats. All right, so let's go back. Let's look at the good old Germany being the biggest in UK in Europe. This is for the entire Euro Union. So in here, yeah, Germany's been hit hard. Building industry's been hit very, very hard. It only goes back to 2013, so it takes it back to just after 2016. That's how much recovery it has. Consumer's been hit fairly hard as well, recovered maybe half. Right now towards back to the 2013 level. Here's the employment indicator. Looks like they'll be okay to get back up and running employment-wise, maybe. But again, I've talked about this in the US about automation, so this may not fully recover. Here's the overall ESI. That's the economic sentiment. So here's industry. Funny enough, yeah, you can see it's been a steady decline for Germany, I guess because of China. So this is well before the peak of 2018, been in decline since. Obviously, it's been the lowest here on record since 2013. It has recovered to pre-pandemic levels, though. So I don't know what's going on there with their industry. German retail has dropped off, almost fully recovered. And then, of course, we have services, maybe halfway it's recovered, but it's at its lowest point, again, since 2013. So not too good there. So let's take a look at France being another big one. And let's see here, France, just FR. I could go through this forever. But let's see, France. France has been surprisingly decent. So here's the building. It's been a steady incline up into 20 for building. That is up until early 2020. Has obviously dropped off down to 2017 rules and has barely recovered. I think this is more. I don't know the economy of France, but I'm going to assume that's part of its tourism that foreigners would be buying property in France. Consumer again only recovered halfway down to its lowest point. I mean, you look at overall, the consumer has dropped in 2019 quite a bit from 2018, recovered. And then in the latter half of 2019 has dropped back off to a low point with the pandemic and is maybe halfway to where the pre-pandemic was. But it's probably at 2015 level for the consumer. EEI. Yeah, I'll tell you, this employment recovery is a lot better than what I've seen for the U.S. and Germany. It's about three-quarters of the way, which is pretty strong when you think about it. ESI only halfway recovered since the drop-off um, as well. The industry is looking pretty good, probably better than um, Germany. Oddly enough, it's quite a bit, almost to pre-pandemic, and it's been holding pretty strong. But it's been negative since at negative 10 since 2014. Again, probably China related or Asia related. The retail has been in the crapper for a while, below zero. Has dropped off a lot, down to negative 40. That's pretty strong. Again, maybe that's a tourism. I don't know, but pretty close to recovering at negative 10, where pre-pandemic was probably, looks like negative 2.5. Services definitely down in the dumper. I mean, that probably is related around tourism. Probably won't come back until travel starts coming back en masse. So that is France. Now, as I said, UK is part of this. I think they are officially in it until the end of the year in 2020, and they'll probably start pumping out their own stats as well. Well, at least not part of the European. Let's check out UK. So UK, so you can see pre-pandemic, it's down maybe 17%, has barely moved back. It's been negative for a long time since 2013. It has recovered a little bit. You can see here. The consumer's down, definitely. Down to negative 2.5 from 2020 at the start, all the way down to negative 25. And barely has moved up to barely around negative 15. So it's definitely in the dumper. EEI employment, not looking good at all. It's just a steady decline since around 2015, peaked at 2015. So that has really nothing to do with the pandemic. Just the EEI has dropped, probably due to the Brexit and the overall sentiment of the UK economy. ESI has really been hit hard from 80, peaked over 100 in 2014. So here at 95, and then dropped back to just over 60, down to maybe 75. So in UK has been hit pretty hard. Industrial, oddly, it's been, as I said, in a steady decline since 2017. Obviously, been hit hard. It's just been started going negative since around beginning early 2019 to the drop of negative 50, which is really low. Recovered quite nicely actually to low 20s and then back down to negative 30. So it's had a double dip or showing signs of it. Retail almost recovering from pre-pandemic, but still in that negative decline. Again, that's probably a lot of tourism. Who knows? Services still in the dumper. Again, you see that negative trend since around 2014, and then the pandemic hit. Before just around negative, I'm going to say 5 maybe, down to negative, ouch, approaching negative 70 and barely at negative 50. So it's barely recovered there. Okay, so that's the UK. Now, we could look at Spain, Ireland, all these countries. Ireland, I'd be interested in knowing about. Greece was another one that really surprised me. It's not as badly hit as some of these other countries I'm showing you. So here's Ireland. So they got hit pretty hard pre-pandemic. That negative move started in 2019, but it's from pre-pandemic, probably around 20, down to negative 25, and it's just been not recovering. That's for building, consumer, ouch. Again, major negative decline all the way down to negative 25, and then just barely moving back up to maybe negative 15. And dropping again. I guess that's because of that second wave about to hit. EEI. Here's an interesting one. Been holding steady over 90, which is pretty good. One of the stronger indicators that I've seen for any country. Drop back in 90 down to 60, came back to 95 and around there, and it's dropped back again. Again, second wave there. But that's a pretty strong recovery for Ireland. Actually, that's probably very strong. ESI, negative again since 2019, down to negative, I'm going to say 65, let's say, and then back up to 85, still down, about halfway. Industry, again, same idea. Negative since beginning of 2019, has dropped back as far close to negative 30. And it's just starting to recover, almost very close to zero. So it's back in a growth mode, I guess. Retail, steady decline since peak of 30 in 2016, and has dropped back to right about here at 10, and then dropped back all the way down to negative 30 in the pandemic. And again, we see this double dip again, where it recovers back to zero and it's back down again, which looks fairly recent. Services. Now here's the industry that's getting hit hard. Negative. It's been steady, strong over 20, and then that pre-pandemic, man, at just over 2025, and it's just dropped off, and it's only recovered to negative 20. So we could keep looking at some of these countries. We've got Italy there. Let's look at Italy as a whole. How hard is it being hit? But Ireland's looking pretty good considering. Oh, Italy's missed some data points here, so been a nice steady up, but it's been just really negative for a long time for Italy, up to negative 5, and then dropped back down to negative 25, it looks like. Consumer's been again negative. I don't know how far back it's missed those data points, but it's back to the levels of 2019 on the consumer front, but still negative. ESI is nowhere close. Dropped back to 80, recovered to 90. ESI is really hit hard, down to just above 60, back up to 80. Yeah, Italy's got some challenges here. Wow, look at that drop. Must have dropped below negative 30 from negative 5. So it's been negative for a long time, since 2013. Drop back, and now it's at negative 20. Retail, barely positive. Was positive over up until, even at 10 pre-pandemic, and it dropped back all the way down. It looks like, I don't know how far down, but to, let's say, negative 25, and it's come back to negative 5. So it could be in recovery if it's not hit by another wave. But Italy services, barely positive at 5 at the beginning of 2020, and then dropped all the way back down to negative 55, and just recovering at negative 30. Let's check out Sweden, because these are countries. I don't think there's Norway in here. If you follow my Forex CFD, you know that Scandinavia looks like a good place to park money as a safe haven. So I don't think Norway is in here, but we can definitely look at Sweden, and maybe we'll look at Finland as well. We can look at Poland as another safe haven as well, see how their economy is doing. Okay, so we are going to look at Sweden. Where are we? Here we go. So Sweden is right here. Okay, so the building peaked at 35 in 2017, has been negative all the way down to 2019. So that's a clear drop. That's probably one of the reasons why Sweden is not as strong as Norway. I'm more convinced that Norway seems to be stronger currency and a stronger safe haven to be in. But in terms of pre-pandemic, probably at zero, and the building has dropped back as far back as negative 35 and barely recovered since. This just goes to show the wealth that Sweden acquired up until 2018, and there's a steady trend down. I could say that about a lot of countries. Now the consumer's been negative, pretty well trending down since 2014. Actually, this is odd. Pre-pandemic, it was at zero and dropped back to -5, and it's come back more positive, which is quite odd, to about 1. Okay, so let's see the overall unemployment. Was about 100, so it's paused. Well, it's been a steady decline, peaking at 112, I assume. Drop all the way back to pre-pandemic, which was at 100, down to -72, and then recovered to roughly about 87. So it's okay, no different than a lot of countries. But Ireland seems to be the one that's handled it best so far. I'm sure there's some other smaller countries, but a major economy like Ireland. So their ESI, overall economic, peaked at 20, halfway between let's say late 2016, 2017 to mid 2018 peak, has gone negative. Pre-pandemic, peaked at around negative, I'm going to say 98, 99, and dropped all the way back to just under 70, and has recovered to just under 90. So its recovery's done okay. Industry, yeah, it's been a negative as well since the beginning of 2019, but steady decline all the way down to about -35. Has recovered to just over maybe -7, but overall it is seeing retail has held steady strong. Peaked at 2016. Looks like it's was at 24, let's say, pre-pandemic. Dropped down to negative 11, 12, and then is now back up into the positive of 5. So they've done well in the retail. Services, again, been in a steady decline since 2018. Pre-pandemic, there's no sign of that. Just a steady drop all the way down to negative 40, low 40s, and then recovered to -20. So it's recovered, but it just long term, it's not doing too good for Sweden. Okay, so let's go to the other Scandinavian country of Finland. You might see a big difference between that and Sweden as well. So there's some trends there, Sweden, that show an overall negative trend for the whole economy as compared to Norway. That's probably why Norway's done better. Okay, so here's Finland. Again, said the same thing, negative trend, but peaked in 2019 and has dropped back to -25. Similar to UK, where it has come back at probably -5, or sorry, -15, and it's dropped back a little bit, -16 or 17. Consumers, same thing, man. It's been a steady, peaked in 2018, steady decline all the way down. No pre-pandemic, nothing. Just a massive drop here. So that's gone from maybe -7 all the way down to -12 or so. Peak back up at negative maybe 4, 3, and drop back to -5. The EEI, this is unemployment, steady decline, which is good, down to 70. So actually, it's not good. That's a steady decline, and then it's recovered back to about 90. Not as bad as Norway or Sweden, but it's still these negative declines I'd be concerned about since 2018, all the way down to 70. Peaked at maybe 115, and it's it increased up to 85 and dropped back down. So that is okay, I guess, but it's these major declines are just huge. from let's say 17 all the way down. That's in midway in 2018. Just another steady decline all the way down to negative 26, let's say, or 24, and then peak back up to negative 16 or so and drop back down to negative 20. Retail, same thing. Peaked in 2018, steady decline, but dropped back. Pre-pandemic, it was a little bit of a peak around 10, dropped all the way back to negative 25, and it's recovering. That's good. To about 0, and maybe a little got into positive territory there. So services, again, these declines since 2018, regardless of the pandemic, and just a steady drop from 30 to negative 40. It has recovered to negative 15 or so. Okay, so that's Finland. Let's see what other countries I can show you. I'd be interested to go through Portugal, just from the British tourism. That has had a positive impact on Portugal. But Ireland's done definitely well of the bunch so far. I'm sure there's some smaller countries that have done well. I was quite surprised with Greece. It wasn't as bad as you would think. But Portugal I'm very interested in. Spain I'm not going to look at. But Portugal may show... let's do Poland first. This is another Eastern European country that that I'm seeing as a safe haven, not just Norway. So let's go through that. Okay, so Poland peaked 2018, but it's been negative quite a while. You can see up to negative 5, little negative 10 pre-pandemic, and all the way back down to negative 42 or so. And it's just recovering back to 27. So consumer-wise, steady trend up, which is pretty good, to 2019, and this steady decline to negative 3, and then the pandemic hit, went down to about negative 24, recovering in around negative 11. Okay, here's the overall employment. It's been steady, peaking at 112 maybe in 2019, and just a steady decline since. Pandemic hits, level was at 100, and drops all the way down to negative 61, 2. Now it's just recovered to 91, 92, so that's good. So the EEI, this is the ESI. It's been stable, peaked at around 2018, gone negative. Pandemic hits at around 90, all the way down to maybe 45, and recovered back to 75. Industrial, same as the other. Peaked a little bit at 2018. Pandemic hits, started negative at negative 10 at the beginning of the year. Pandemic hit, dropped all the way down to maybe 38. Recovered to negative 22. Retail, stable again, but steady decline again from 2019. Peaked in 2018. Steady pandemic hits, where it's at, I'm going to say negative, around 0, I guess. So no growth. And then it just dropped all the way down to negative 35 and sit around negative 10, 12 for Poland. But it's been stable. But no growth, though. Not much growth. So services was peaked 2018, 0, and just went negative at the beginning of the year, down to negative 5, let's say, and just a stone drop all the way down to negative 47, 48. Recovered back to negative 25 or so. That's for services. So here we are at Portugal. Portugal's done well as well. Peaked in 2019. Nice, very good. And okay, so it's peaked. Well, it's been in negative territory, like for instance, negative 70 in 2013, but has strengthened a little bit, still negative, but peaked at around 2019. And looks like it hasn't dropped as far as some other countries from negative 10 down to negative 30. Now it's back up to maybe negative 15, let's say. That's not too bad. Place to buy a house, I guess. Consumer barely been positive between 2017 to 2019. Then it went negative right when the pandemic hit. I shouldn't say negative, but negative 10 as a baseline. And then dropped back down below that to negative 35, 36. Recovered back to late negative 20s. So that's definitely tourism. Building here is definitely people buying real estate, and hint the Brits, I'm going to assume. EEI, 110, so it was stable for a while, peaked in around 2018, 2019. Pandemic hit, dropped it all the way down to 70, recovered back to 100. So it's a decent recovery. ESI, peaked again 2018, started to decline slightly, went really down negative from there at 105, I'm going to say, all the way down to, let's say, negative 62, 63, recovered to about 80, 85. So it's not heavily hit. Portugal, slightly negative, peaked a little bit in 2017, 2018 to positive 5, dropped back down 2018, 2019. Not too bad at negative 5, and then it dropped. The pandemic hit to down to negative 35. So it's recovered down to just under negative 16, I'm going to say. So that's not too bad. So Portugal hasn't been hit in certain areas. So it's been fairly positive in the retail since 2014. Dropped all the way down to negative 27, and then has somewhat recovered to about negative 12. So it's not too bad. Services, again, been positive since 2014, not very strong. And pandemic, when it hit, was around 6, 7, dropped it all the way back down to negative 50, and has slowly recovered up to about negative 30. Let's see what other countries. Oh yeah, Turkey. Turkey's another surprise. We could look at, I think Luxembourg was another one that did okay as well. But let's look at Turkey. Turkey is TR. Okay, so Turkey has always been negative, but really went negative since 2018. Oh, wow. 2019, it went negative down to negative 55. Must be that Rojaden. Peaked back in 2020 to negative 25, dropped back down to negative 55, and recovered to negative 15. I guess not a place not to buy a house. Consumer, wow, they've been in the tanker. So it's peaked at 5 in 2014, been negative since. And pandemic had nothing to do with the how Turkey's done not too well. It's been negative 15, 2019, negative 20 in 2019, and then dropped it back down to negative 20. So it's always been negative. So the pandemic hasn't really hit the consumer in Turkey. The EEI was steadily declining, dropped back to an 80 as a low point in 2019, back up to just over 100. Pandemic hit and brings it back down to just over 50, and then recovers at say 93, let's say. So ESI, the ESI economic sentiment indicator peaked, I'm going to say around 2015. So that Rajan, he comes back 2018, goes negative, so that drops back to 80, and then it peaks back up to just about 95 in 2020 pre-pandemic, and then drops all the way back to just about 45, and then it's at just above 80. In the industry, barely been positive since 2013. A couple of peaks here. Peaked in 2017 at just over 5. Drops back in 2018 to negative 10. Started to push back up to positive, maybe around to 2. And then it dropped back all the way down to negative 30, and it's fully recovered up until about 1 or 2 again. Okay, so we got retail. Retail, you can see the steady decline, but it dropped back to negative 15 in 2018. Recovered somewhat to positive 4, let's say, 2019. Or actually in 2020, and then dropped back all the way back down to negative 32 or so, and then it's recovered back up to negative 4. So here's the services. You can see that steady decline somewhat. Drop back to negative 25, recover to nearly 0, but still negative, and then at that point drops back to negative 55, and now is at negative 30. So I could go on and on like with this stuff. Luxembourg. Let's see Luxembourg here. You can tell there's no Switzerland because they're not part of the EU or the EC. I think they're part of the EC, but this only does the EU, the European Union. And then we'll do Luxembourg, and then we'll leave it at that. I'm sure I could do more. If you're interested, just let me know what country you'd be interested in. I'll definitely could do that for you. Okay, so let's look at Luxembourg, one of the wealthier countries. So peaked positively. It's not very strong. So 2017, just to give you an idea, it's at 10. Then it peaked all the way in the same year. The 40 dropped back down to 10. Stayed positive up until 20. Dropped back, not slightly negative, maybe down to 1 or 2, and then it's recovered a little bit. But then you can see that steady decline again. So it's recovered to maybe negative to positive 5, and then drops back. So the consumer, barely positive, only for a very short time. It's been negative. But it does trend up from 2013, from negative 17 to barely positive around 3 or 4. And this is in 2018, drops back to negative 2 or so, at barely goes positive for a little bit in 2019. Steady decline, and then this massive drop from negative 4, let's say, all the way down to negative 18. Not as deep as some other countries, but it has come back to negative, I'm going to say 11, and then drop back down to negative 15. So the ESI, not that, well, it's okay. 95 broke through 2016 up to the peak of 115 in 2017, and it's been a steady decline since. Negative 100, or it was at 100. This is the ESI, and then it goes back down to maybe 76 and stabilized at maybe 97, 98. Industrial. Okay, so it's peaked all the way up to just barely positive at maybe 5, and then dropped back negative. And that was in 2017, dropped back to negative, down to negative 20 in this year, and then it dropped all the way back down to negative 51, 52, recovered back to negative 5, I'm going to say. And that's it. So a lot of countries have gone into negative territory since 2018, 19, and the pandemic hit, and it fully kills it, but it's still in negative territory, a lot of these countries. But I'm sure a lot of people, like Greece is nowhere as bad as you think it would be. So that's Greece is EL. Let's see, Greece, EL. Okay, so it's all over the place. You could see, mostly negative. It's all negative, but it peaked at -5, and then for 2019 was around -25, and that's dropped all the way back during the pandemic, all the way back down to, I'm going to say, -76, 77. Went back to -32, and then dropped back to -40. Not good, not good at all. So the consumer's still in the crapper from a low in 2017 at -7. That's how steep it's been for Greece right up until this point from 2013. Went all the way up, still negative, but peaked in 2019 to -4 or 5 maybe, and then dropped back to -30. And pretty well hasn't recovered since. The EEI steady. Here's the thing. So you have this steady decline down to 75 in 2015. It's trended up, and this is the employment now, and peaked in beginning of 2020, and dropped back to maybe 95, back up to 105. So the employment's not too bad. ESI is the same. So during that period, people feel good. Went up to 112 as the peak in 2020. Can you imagine? And then dropped back to 85. So the low point of that would be in 2015 halfway, and it's still not as low as it could be. Industry has steadily gone up again. Peaked at positive, close to 5 this year, and dropped back to negative um, 17, but it's been negative all the majority since 2013. Let's see here. Retail. Again, same trend since 2016, steadily up to maybe 30, and then drop back down to 20, just over 20. So that takes it back to 2016 and recovered, and then back down to 20 again this year. Okay, let's look at the services. Peaked at 2014, 15, dropped back to -42, trended all the way back to 30. So half of it is maybe positive. And then a massive drop from the peak of around 32 all the way down to -46, let's say, and recovered only to -30. While we're here, we have Spain. So again, similar to Greece, it's been negative all the time, been barely positive, only in 2018-19, peaked to around 6 or 7, and dropped back to negative 25. So the consumer been always negative. The low point, it was -40 in 2013, but been hit. It's not as low as that, but down to -28 or so in the pandemic. And then the economic indicator. So it's trended up, peaked in 2018, started a slight decline, and then as soon as that pandemic hit, it went down all the way down to 65, recovered to 91, 92, and dropped back. So the ESI, nice trend from 2013 to 2016, went flat a little bit, and peaked again in 2018, decline, and then again dropped back all the way down to 70. So it hasn't been this low at all since 2013. Industry trended up nicely, went slightly positive in 2016. 2018 it went slightly positive and dropped negative to -5 in 2020, and the pandemic hit, down to -30, recovered down to maybe -13. Spanish retail. This is all definitely all tourists. Stayed positive between 2014 all the way up to 2020. So it stayed positive, peaking at 25. Not strong, but positive. And then dropped back in 2020 all the way down to negative 37 and recovered up to about negative 22 and dropped back to negative 38 maybe. So one more, we have the services again stayed positive since 2014 and up until the pandemic, and then just dropped down to negative 52 and slightly recovered to negative 35 and started a trend down. When you're seeing these trend downs again, that's definitely the second wave that's hitting it. Let's see what else we got here that I could. So these other newer countries like Serbia, Croatia, I'm not going to bother with, but you can look at these in the spreadsheet. Latvia, Cyprus. I think people want me to do Malta, that being a popular country for tourists. So let me do that. Austria, I'll do Austria as well, because that's pretty well a less talked about country. And then we'll do that. So we'll do Malta, which is MT. MT, let's see. Here we go. So it's been positive between 2015, went negative, went back to positive in 2017, stayed positive, peaked at just under 40, which is not bad. Started going negative again in 2019, and then dropped all the way down to negative 40, recovered to negative 7, and started going back down again. Consumer, I think where it stays positive here, it's tourism or investment, I don't know. But it stayed positive from 2013, peaked at about 17. Stayed positive until actually this year, and it dropped, not too bad actually, down to negative 15. So that's probably tourism. Investment peaked back up at negative 7, dropped back down slightly. So that's pretty good actually. The overall employment stayed above 90, peaked at 120 in 2018. And up until the beginning of the year, it was at 100, dropped back down to 50, just the high 50s, recovered and recovering, back up to 80. So Malta's not looking too bad, actually. ESI stayed above 100, peaked at 120. Beginning of the year was at 100. Then the Malta dropped back down to just over 50. And it's now recovered at around 75, let's say. That's pretty good. Malta industry has been somewhat negative, but let's say half. Some positive peaks here, just up to around 10 or 15 at 2015, 2016, 2018. It's pretty steep, and it started to decline in 2020 and dropped back when the pandemic hit around to negative 45 and has recovered to negative 35. So this is pretty good. Gotta say, Malta's looking good. Retail staying negative but positive between 2015, 2016. Positive, but it's not as stable. It's been pretty rocky from 2016. Slight negative in 2016. Stayed positive mostly in 2017. And 2018 was good, didn't go negative. 2018 went down negative. And then since around the beginning or late 2019, it's been trending down. Pandemic hit, went down to negative 55. So that's retail. Services, again, probably tourism, I'm going to assume, stayed above 20. Even in late 2019, stayed above 20. and declined since down to negative 58 and recovered to negative 20 for this year. I think that's it. While we're at it, I said we'll look at Austria. Probably we'll do Cyprus as well, and that's similar to Malta. So Cyprus, let's see. Cyprus is CY. And we'll do Australia, and we'll close it out at that. Okay, so Cyprus. Okay, so here we are. We should look at Czechoslovakia as well, or Czech. Wow, very good. It's been negative, but started going positive, went down to negative 20. So there's definitely a nice strong uptrend for Cyprus. Consumer, very negative at negative 2013. Very few periods of just above zero. In 2018, slight negative decline down to negative 30. So there you go. That's the employment indicator. As far as I know about Cyprus, I think it's a lot of Russians invest there and live the wealthier ones. So this is probably helping out Cyprus as a whole. So it stayed above 100 since 2015. Peaked out at 115. Stayed above 100. And it has not been hit whatsoever on the employment side. It's staying at around 100. That's impressive. Okay, ESI. So steadily was above 80, trended up to 100, just over 100, 115, stayed in around there, oscillated a little bit. This year it hit, went back down to negative 75, 75, and is now at 85. So it's done okay, and not as a deep decline industry. Barely stayed positive here since early 2016. Hasn't gone up much either, and then it's dropped back from around 10 down to negative 40, 45. That's steep as yet, but it's at right now about negative 25. Retail's always been negative, but had some positive moments up to 10 from, let's say, around fall of 2016 till about early 2019, and it's steadily declined since down to negative 30. Services not as strong at 20. So it's been negative up until 2015. Started to trend up a little bit all the way up to maybe 41, 42 in 2018. And steadily declined all the way back to negative 60 and recovering to negative 42 or so. So as I said, we'll do Czechoslovakia, or Czech, I should say. So here is not too bad. Been negative, slight positive in 2019. So it's been trending up until that point, but still negative. And then the pandemic has not hit it as hard, down to negative 15 and coming back up. That's pretty good. Been negative, positive, not until really 2016. Went up to maybe 6, stayed positive since. Getting not hit as hard, and then went down to negative 15 or so. But you've heard the other numbers for the negative on the consumer, so it's not too bad. EEI now, here's a big one. So it went steadily trend from 82, peaked all the way up to 120, stayed above 110, and that peaked in 2016. Stayed above the 110, and then just a steady decline, and dropped all the way back down to 81 or 82. It hasn't really recovered a lot since. ESI stayed above 90 all the way up till sometime in 2020. This is the pandemic hit, and then it went down to negative 60, mid 60s, and then recovered all the way up to maybe 80 yeah, 82 or so, and slight decline since. Industry stayed above. Oh, it's been negative most of the time. Stayed above zero from 2014 till about 2019. Declined for that year, and then just started to drop all the way down to negative 31, 32, and has recovered to negative 5, let's say. Retail stayed positive, trended up, peaked at 25, 2018, and steadily declined. Recovered to 22, 23 this year. Pandemic hit, and then it went down to 3, 4, and went back up to 15. So it's not been in negative territory at all. It's not been hit hard as a lot of the other countries. So the services been pretty stable above 20, peaked at 40. 2018 started to decline 2019, and it's just been dropped all the way down to negative 12, and it's recovered all the way up to I'm going to say 2 or 3, and then started going negative again. So that's that. Let's look at Austria, last country. Belgium's not doing too bad as well, but as I said, I can go on and on with this stuff. So here's Austria. Been negative up to 2017, started to recover, peaked at 20 in 2018, stayed above 10 in 2010 and 2019, and dropped down to negative 16 and back to 0, and then back down to negative 5. So the consumer, we can see here, it's been mostly negative, went positive in around 2017 to about 4, went back to negative, all on start trending down in 2019, and dropped all the way back down to probably negative 17, let's say, recovered to negative 7, and started to decline back down to negative 10. So what tells me when you see these second decline in the pandemic, it says something that they're not managing the pandemic well, or the population is not managing it, because it does recover and then it starts to decline again with that second wave hitting. You can see that. EEI stayed above 90, peaked at 120, hasn't dropped back down, but the pandemic, it did go down to maybe 65, recovered to about 80, 85, so it's not been as heavily hit as other countries. The ESI stayed above 90, peaked in 2018 at 120, started to decline at 100, dropped all the way back to 61, 62, all the way up to 85. So, on that. That's the industry now. Has been negative most of it up until 2017. Started to go up to 10, peaked at probably 12 in 2018, and then back it down it goes. Down to, let's say, negative 8 in 2020, went down with a pandemic at negative 30, and it's been at around negative 15. So Austria is not one of the better countries to be part of. Negative 20 for the retail. Well, it's been negative all the way and stayed negative. Peaked a little bit positive 2017, and then it's now dropped back down to negative 45, and it's recovered to maybe 22 or so. Okay, services, Zip stayed slightly positive since 2013, peaked at 30, and that was in 2018, declined up until 2020, and then it really dropped up until about negative 42, 43, and then came back and currently around 10, probably negative 7. So we know what countries to be part of, I guess, for the economy. Well, let's do Belgium while we're here. Been mostly negative, wow, for building. Barely positive for 18, just up to maybe 3 or 4, and then went back down to negative, dropped back to negative 16, 17. but it was in its doldrums in 2014-15 for building. Consumer, again, negative. Peaked at 0, good for them in 2014. Wow, it's been declining since 2017. Well, from -1, let's say, all the way down after the pandemic, -20, recovered again to -11, 12, and back down to -15. So EEI stayed above 90, which is good, and then dropped from just over 100, 105, let's say, for this year, dropped all the way back down to 65, and then recovered to about low 80s at 81, 82. ESI stayed above 100 good chunk of the time. Goes into another decline since 2019 all year. Recovered to 100 and then just dropped all the way back to 60. Recovered to about 83, I'm going to say. Industry. Okay, so it's been negative a good chunk up until negative, I've been barely positive. Belgium for 2018 maybe peaked at 2 or 3, if that, maybe 1 actually, and then declined since mid 2018 down to -10. Recovered a little bit, and this is all this year. Negative, close to -5. Dropped again to -30, and now it's at probably negative. I'm gonna say 16, 17. So not looking good for Belgium at all. So it's all negative again. Went positive a little bit in 2014. Peaked at maybe 8, I'm going to say. Went back to negative. This year it went positive slightly. I don't know, barely over 0. Dropped back to negative 42, 43. And then you got recovered to negative 20. Services. Okay, so generally it stayed positive, not much. Back in 2013, went up to 25, stayed above 10 for all 2017, 18, dropped back below 10, started going negative at 2020, dropped back to -50s, come back to -20. So I'd say Belgium services is its strength. And we'll leave it at that. All right. So hopefully it'll help you out. Thanks for watching.